Hey, what's up guys? In this video we're going to go over how to set up and program your Escort Max 3 to optimize the performance and minimize false alerts. Now, down in the video description, I'm also going to link you to my Max 3 setup article, which goes over all the same information that's available here in the video as far as the different settings. Plus, at the bottom, you'll also find my general recommended settings for the detector, as well as the settings that I personally run on my Max 3. If you'd prefer the video version, well, let's do that. So hopping on over here to the detector, you can actually go in and adjust a lot of the settings in the detector itself by pressing and holding the mark button and the sensitivity button. If you take a look at the top of the detector, you'll notice right here it actually has these two buttons and it says preferences. We'll go ahead and just press and hold those two buttons like this, and it's going to drop us into the preferences here. We can press the mark button like this just to kind of scroll through the different options. We can take our maybe volume buttons, and this is going to allow us to switch between the different options. But a lot of times it may actually just be easier to go over here, go into the detector settings in the app, and then you can just go and maybe adjust all the different options this way, like change the display color or whatever else. I find this a lot of times just to be quicker and easier than going through the menu itself. Now, if it's your first time connecting to the detector, you're going to want to launch the Escort Live app like this, which you can download off the App Store. And then you're going to want to go over here to Devices, and then at the bottom here, it'll actually search for the detector, and you'll see Max 3. You're going to want to tap on that. It's going to prompt you to pair. You say yes, and then it'll say eventually connected to the Max 3. And you'll know that you're connected because you see this speed limit icon right here like this. We're going to go back over here into the settings, and then once it's connected, we're going to go over here to radar settings. Now, starting off with sensitivity, let's talk about the different sensitivity modes. These are designed to adjust the detector sensitivity to X-band and K-band. Now, Ka-band and laser, those are always going to run at full sensitivity no matter what you set here in the detector. This is just designed to adjust X and K-band sensitivity, where you may actually see more false alerts here. This does fall sometimes to Ka-band as well, like you saw as I was doing this video. That's going to be a separate option. But as far as the K and X-band stuff, that's what we're going to control here. Now, auto mode is designed to vary the detector sensitivity based on your speed. At higher speed, you get more sensitivity. At lower speed, you get less sensitivity. And this can be helpful around town where you're just going to see more sources of false alerts. So if you don't have a ton of K-band in use, you maybe want to dial back the detector sensitivity. Now, there was an issue with firmware version 1.1 to where it would dial back the sensitivity so far that it could easily lead to a ticket. Now, fortunately, firmware version 1.2 is now available, and this actually resolves this issue. So definitely make sure you've got your detector updated. You're going to want to go over to Escort's website, download Escort Detector Tools, plug in your detector, and make sure it updates to the latest version of the firmware. Now, a quick and easy way to check what firmware version you have on the detector, we'll go ahead and turn it off real quick. On top of the detector, we've got two buttons. We've got the mark button and the mute button. So you're going to want to press and hold those two buttons. Just think M&M, mark and mute. And then we're going to plug in the power cable. The detector will boot up, and it'll tell us the current firmware version. You can see I've got firmware version 1.2 loaded in right now, and it also displays my serial number, which I've got blurred out for the video. Now, over time, Escort, I'm sure, is going to continue making improvements and adjustments to the detector. There's probably going to be new features added and changes made. I can't update this video once it's posted, but I can update the article on my website. So for the latest information, again, you can always check out the article, link in the video description, and that'll keep everything updated as new firmware updates come out. Okay, now that we're back in the app, let's resume talking about all the sensitivity stuff. So again, auto mode, good for kind of a mix of highway and city driving. Auto no X is going to be a similar idea, except it's just going to disable X-band detection altogether. Auto low K, X-band sensitivity will vary with speed, but K-band sensitivity will always be at the lowest level possible, no matter what speed you're driving. And then finally, highway mode is going to be full sensitivity on all bands, including X and K-band, at all times. And a quick note, you'll actually get longer range in highway mode on K-band than you will at auto mode, even if you're driving at highway speeds. So if you want the longest range possible on K-band, switch it over to highway mode. Otherwise, auto mode is going to be kind of a balance for both highway and city driving. Next, we've got our brightness options. This is going to allow us to adjust the detector's display brightness like this. So we've got minimum, medium, maximum, and auto display brightness, which is going to vary the detector's display brightness, get brighter in the daytime, dimmer at night. And then if you want a super stealthy looking detector, you can always switch it to dark mode. And then if you go back, you'll notice that even with dark mode enabled, you're still going to be able to hear the alerts and everything. We'll just mute it real quick. And all the information will show up here on the phone, so if you want maybe a stealthier looking detector or you don't want people to see your detector, you can hear the information here with the detector, but it's not going to visually display anything. We can turn the brightness back on if we want, and then all the information will show back up here on screen again. Next, moving on to the pilot option. By default, you're going to have kind of this scanning bar at the top. If you want to turn that off and get rid of the animation, you can do that right here. Now, as far as our metering mode, this is going to adjust kind of what information is displayed on screen when a signal is present. So if we start off with the standard mode, oops, and we just locked out that signal, so let's unlock that. Let's go back here and turn off auto learn. And so, cool, okay. Signal is unlocked. So anyways, you can see over here, it's actually displaying the band and the signal strength here on K-band, right? We also have the option over here, if we go to spec display, it'll do the same thing, but it's going to display the signal frequency here on top. And that can be really useful to get you additional information of what's going on. Maybe determine is it a legitimate alert, false alert. That can be pretty useful. The expert meter is going to allow you to display information for up to 4 signals simultaneously. So it'll give you the band, you can see K-band, as well as the signal strength. If any of the signals are locked out, they'll actually show up in gray. And then finally, we have the simple alert display. And this will display like this: slow down if you're traveling above the speed limit. If you're traveling below the speed limit, it'll just display caution in yellow. I personally prefer spec display, but choose whatever you like. Next, we also have the auto mute option. Now, auto mute is great. You can have the detector alert at full volume initially, and then after a couple seconds, it's going to drop the alert volume to a quieter level so it's not screaming at you constantly. Let's actually just demo that here real quick. So you heard it there, alert at full volume for a little while, and then it dropped the alert volume. If you want, you can actually adjust how far down it drops that alert volume. Low is going to drop it down to the lowest level, medium is what you just heard, and high is going to drop it down to the highest level. So if you want maybe only a little bit of a volume drop, you can set that here. If you set it to off, that's just going to continue to alert at full volume the whole time, which may be useful for testing or dashcam videos or something, but most people probably want to use some form of auto muting. Next, we also have the audio tone. So this is adjusting what the tones sound like. The standard is going to be kind of the default Escort tones. If you want, you can also set it to mild, and that's going to sound more like a doorbell chime. Yeah, we'll set it back to standard for now. Okay, and we'll just mute it for now too. So, okay, next we have the ZR3 mode. Now, this is the mode if you're running one of Escort's optional laser jammers or laser shifters with your Max 3. Now, Escort sells the ZW5 and the ZR5 laser jammers, and you can set those up in your car and then plug it into your Max 3, so your Max 3 becomes kind of the central controller display speaker for the laser jammer. And then in the detector, you can actually set it up to control the laser jammers. If you want, you can turn off the laser jamming altogether. That's separate from the laser detection of the radar detector. This is, again, just for the laser jammers themselves. You can set it up so that they don't jam the officer. They're only going to detect when you're getting shot with laser. And you can also set up how the jamming functionality works. You can either turn it on so it's always jamming, and then it requires you to double press the mute button to manually disarm when shot. I personally recommend using the 4-second automatic disarm. So when you get shot, it alerts you on the detector, and then it's going to jam for 4 seconds, gives you enough time to slow down, and then it'll disable the jammers after 4 seconds. This shift mode, I think, is going to be best for just testing mode only. Day-to-day, you'll want to set it up for something like shift 4 seconds. Next, we also have the voice option. If you want it to maybe announce, what band it's picking up, you can enable that here. Now, that can be pretty useful once you first get the detector and you're getting familiar with the different alert tones. Personally, I wind up turning it off because I want to listen to the ramp up to hear if it's, alerting really strongly, if it's weaker, and kind of how the signal changes over time. But I think at first it's a great option to have enabled. Plus, when you go into the detector's menu,
Preferences.
It's also going to speak the different options here too.
Advanced. Novice user. Advanced. Completed.
So if you wanted to speak everything when you're in the menu, that's also going to be activated here with the voice. But once you get familiar with it, I think you can turn it off, but totally up to you. Next, we have the auto power option. This is going to be set up to automatically turn off your detector after a period of time in case you have it plugged into a power source that's always turned on. This way it doesn't drain your car battery. So let's say you're parked, and then after 4 hours, let's say, if the detector is still on, it's noticed I've been parked here, it'll go ahead and shut itself off to not drain your car battery. Now, something else to note is if you have this enabled, the detector's display will actually turn off after half an hour, again, just to save your car battery and stuff, though it'll still stay on until you have the time set for it to shut off altogether. Once you resume driving, though, once you get above 10 miles an hour, the display will automatically turn back on. Next, we have our units, so you can set up to display everything in miles per hour, or you can set it to metric to get everything here in kilometers per hour. Next, we've got our GPS filter. By default, it's turned on. This is going to be useful for a lot of your GPS-based, speed-based false alert filters. If you want to turn that off, you can do that here, but I think for most people, you'll want to leave turned on. Auto learn, this is going to be your auto lockouts. And you saw it before as I was shooting at K-band. It saw repeatedly it was seeing the same signal and it locked it out for me. So I'm going to turn it off for now. But for most people, you'll want to have it turned on because it's just going to recognize as you keep driving past the same false alerts. So speed signs, door openers, things like that. It keeps seeing the same signal in the same location. It's going to recognize that as a false alert and lock it out. There's always a risk, though. It could lock out a police radar gun if they're always sitting in the same spot, but that's going to be extremely rare, especially because there's going to be times when you pass by that location and the officer's not there. So it has auto learn and it also has auto unlearn. So it has to see it pretty much every single time that you're here. So there's always a risk that it could lock out an officer, but it's super, super rare. If you want, you can always maybe manually lock out signals just by double pressing the mute button. And actually, let's take a look at that. And then we'll double press the mute button like this, and it's going to go ahead and lock out that signal. Now you can see the signal is grayed out and it's muted, and so every time we come by here in the future, it's going to be locked out. If you want, you can actually unlock the signal as well just by double pressing the mute button like that, and then it's going to go ahead and unlock it for us. Now, in general, I think for most people, it's probably best just to rely on auto lockouts and kind of let it figure everything out. If you want to manually lock out a signal, like let's say you're passing a speed sign or something and you're sure this is definitely not a police officer, it's a false alert, you can just do a manual lockout. But in general, you can just kind of let the detector take care of it for you, and after you drive around for a little while, it'll figure out all the false alerts, and you're good to go. Now, the next option is going to be cruise alert. This is going to be your low-speed muting, just to, again, help keep the detector a little bit quieter around town. When you have this enabled, instead of just a normal alert that you'll hear, when you're traveling under the speed limit, it'll actually just give you 2 beeps, and then it'll go quiet. Now, a quick note, this cruise alert threshold that you set, it's only going to be active when you're not using Escort Live. When you do have it connected to the cloud, it's actually going to ignore whatever number that you have set here and instead just rely on the speed limit. And if you're traveling above the speed limit, it'll alert normally. But if you're traveling below the speed limit, it'll just give you those 2 beeps and then it goes quiet. If you're not connected to the cloud, then it's going to fall back to whatever cruise alert limit you set here in the app or in the detector. Next, we can go here to overspeed alert, and this is going to allow you to just maybe get notified if you're traveling over a certain speed. If you don't want that notification, you can just turn it off here altogether. Now the next one, we've got different languages. You can set either language, or you can set, you can set English rather, or you can set it here to Spanish. Autopista. Okay, we're going to do English for now. And display color, you can choose, whatever display color you want, maybe something that matches your vehicle's interior, whatever you like. Next, we've got our speed on display. You can have it display your speed right here on the detector, or alternatively, you can turn it off and have it display the vehicle's voltage if you like instead. Next, we've got our user mode. This is novice or advanced. This is pretty much just going to adjust what options are available when you go here in the detector. Novice is going to give you kind of a simplified list of controls. Advanced is going to give you all this, pretty much all the options that are available either in the app or in the detector. You're going to be able to access them all in the detector. Now, no matter what you set, you can set it to novice, and you're still going to have access to all of this stuff here. This is only just going to be adjusting whatever options are available in the detector itself. Next, we can start adjusting our band, so turning off, what bands the detector is going to be picking up. First, we've got our laser control. If you want to maybe turn off laser detection altogether, you can do that right here. Otherwise, you can leave it turned on. Pop detection, if you want it to detect pop, you can turn it on, but for most people, I would definitely recommend leaving it off for improved performance, fewer false alerts. Pop isn't really something you're going to see in practice, so yeah, just turn it off. Next, we have our 3 primary bands. We've got X-band, K-band, and Ka-band. Now, X-band is really only actively in use in Ohio and New Jersey, so most people, I think, can safely turn that off. K-band and Ka-band, you can turn it on and off. This is just going to have it scan all of K-band and all of Ka-band. If you turn it off, then you have access to some of the advanced controls for band segmentation available here for both K-band and Ka-band. This, if you're familiar with what frequencies are in use in your area, you can kind of get more fine-tuned control for what frequencies it scans for and turn off the ones that are not in use in your area, which is just going to help improve the performance of the detector and also help cut out some of the false alerts that you'll get on Ka band otherwise. Again, if you want to scan for everything, you can just turn these on right there and it just ignores the individual segments. But let's turn them off for now, and then we'll talk about that once we get down to those. Now, as far as TSR, this is going to be your traffic sensor rejection. Now, in some places on the highway, they actually have these K-band transmitters, these traffic sensors that monitor the flow of traffic, and every half mile or whatever, you'll keep getting these blasts of K-band, completely independent from blind spot falses or whatever. If you encounter those, you can turn TSR on, though that is negatively going to affect your performance, and so if you don't have that in your area, you can just leave it turned off, but if you do encounter it, definitely turn it on to help cut out those false alerts. Similarly, we also have RDR available here. This stands for Radar Detector Rejection. This is designed to filter out false alerts from other radar detectors nearby that kind of leak energy and actually cause false alerts on your radar detector. They tend to be kind of lower end, poorly designed radar detectors, and yeah, they'll cause false alerts for other radar detector users nearby. If you encounter that, you can turn on RDR, but keep in mind that turning that filter on will otherwise negatively impact your performance on Ka band, so most people for maximum performance will leave it turned off. But I have noticed this detector will false from time to time on Ka band, so you can kind of rely either on the segments, or you can also turn on RDR if you need it. Next, let's actually go ahead and start diving into the band segmentation options. So first we have the K-band segments here, and this again is just going to give you more control over which frequency ranges within K-band the detector is going to scan for. I'll put the frequency ranges here on screen. Segments 1, 2, and 3 is where you'll definitely see radar on K-band used here in the United States. In some places you may see segment 4 used as well, kind of down below 24.050, down into the 23.9-ish range. So you can turn that on if you like to scan more, but if you encounter maybe only false alerts down there's no police officers that use that in your area, you can always turn that segment off if you like. Now moving on to Ka band segmentation, this I think is going to be more popular, and this is really something I think you'll want to look into here in the US, especially because, well, this will definitely have more of a positive impact to performance if you start turning off different segments. Now what you'll find is most guns here in the US, they're going to be transmitting on segments 2, 5, and 8, or 33.8, 34.7, and 35.5. In some places, like in New York, you may see kind of some stalkers that drift high or low, and so you may actually want to turn on some additional segments. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be super standard with a lot of detectors at this point. And the different frequency ranges, again, I'll just put here on screen so you can see what the different segments are like. Now, something to note here is with the Max 3, there is no segment 10. What's normally segment 10, kind of like upper 35-ish, close to 36, that has actually been combined with segment 9. So what used to be segment 9 and 10 have now been combined into one segment called segment 9, which honestly I actually think makes sense. But just something to keep in mind, most detectors will actually have 10 segments, but here there's only 9, and that's why. Now, if you're wondering which segments you need in your area, I'll put a link in the video description to kind of a guide that covers, well, which segments you need for each state. So that can be a really useful resource for you as well. Then scrolling down, we've got our options here for MultaRadar CD and CT. These are going to be different low-powered photo radar guns that are in use in different places here in North America. I'll put a list on screen of where we found these to be in use so far as well. And this is just where we've seen so far. It's going to, of course, slowly spread in different areas over time. And if you don't have it in your area, I would recommend leaving it turned off because you are going to see some false alerts if you have it turned on. So if you don't need it yet, I would leave it turned off until you actually do need it. And then finally, we can go here to the different markers. Now, the detector has a GPS database built in that can notify you to things like red light cameras or fixed speed cameras. When you pass by those, the detector can actually display a warning on screen and also give you an audio prompt. You can turn on and off what things it alerts you to. So you can have it alert you to red light cameras, to speed cameras, to known common speed traps, etc. We also have anything that's combined red light and speed camera in one unit. That's the option there. I'm not still totally sure what the other is, but that's there as well. I usually just turn it off. I haven't found it to be useful. And there's also going to be air patrol, which is locations where they commonly do aircraft enforcement. It's not where they actively are now. It's just a location where speed enforcement is commonly done via police, helicopters, and planes. And then finally, we've got a couple settings that are only currently available in the detector. They're not available in Escort Live. I'm assuming they're going to be added at some point, but they're, at least at the time that I'm shooting this video, only available in the detector. So let's take a look at that next. We'll go ahead and dive into the menu and scroll all the way towards almost the end. So the first one is going to be K-Notch. This is a pretty useful feature that you can turn on and off just to help with BSM filtering. Now, you're going to get some false alerts to some Hondas and Acuras that transmit around 24.198, 24.200, kind of that range or so. And so K-Notch is just going to do some additional filtering around that frequency range between 24.190 to 24.210, kind of a 20 megahertz range. And in that range, it's going to reduce the detector sensitivity to help filter out a lot of the weak false alerts that you'll get from those Hondas and Acuras and whatnot. Now, this is a frequency range where you can potentially see a legitimate police radar as well, so they're not blocking it out altogether. They're reducing the sensitivity, so it will reduce range against even legitimate signals as well, but it's also going to help filter out false alerts from Hondas and Acuras that the detector would otherwise filter to. So that could be a useful feature, especially if you don't maybe have a ton of K-band in your area. It just helps keep the detector that much quieter. We also have the ability to clear different locations, so if maybe you marked some locations and you want to delete it afterwards, you can do that here. And we also have this interface option right here, which controls if you have something else connected to the detector besides just the detector running standalone. Now, the names aren't super intuitive, but Interface 1 is designed if you're running an Escort ZR5 or ZW5 laser jammer. If you have that plugged into the Max 3, you'll want interface set up to Mode 1. Alternatively, if you have the detector plugged into an aftermarket interface for your vehicle's display, you'll want to set it up to Mode 2 instead. If you're not using an aftermarket display for your Max 3 and you don't have it plugged into the Escort laser jammers, this setting doesn't matter at all. And other than that, that's it. That's just a quick run through of the Max 3 settings and kind of what they do in terms of performance, filtering, all that kind of stuff. Again, down in the video description, I'm going to have a link to my article on my website that goes over all this as well. Plus, at the end of that article, it also goes over my general recommended settings, as well as the settings that I personally run on my Max 3 when I'm driving around. And so, yeah, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you in the next video.